Let's get started with Chapter 5, The Working Cell, for Bio 112 with M.Hook. In this chapter, we're going to look at how the cell functions, how we transport molecules in and out, how molecules move so that the cell maintains its normal structure. So first we're going to talk a little bit about energy. What exactly is energy? We all have lots of ideas of what it is, but the actual definition, energy is defined as the capacity to do work. So that means the ability to either move objects or alter the temperature. So that can either be called like work or heat. There are two types of energy. There's kinetic energy and potential energy. So kinetic energy is energy in motion being used. Generally will be like converting it to heat. And whereas potential energy is stored energy. We're not using it right now, but we could. So for example, this dam, all the water on the top, there's a huge amount of pressure. That's potential energy. And as the water moves through, that's kinetic energy. So a person on a bike, they're moving, they're putting energy in, burning calories with their muscles. They get up to the top of a hill. They're not moving. They don't have any kinetic energy now, but they have potential energy because they're on the top of this hill. And all they have to do is just slightly move forward, and then they roll down. And what happens is that potential energy is converted to kinetic energy as they go. They'll lose energy as friction and heat as they go down. We're going to look at the laws of thermodynamics. So the first law, energy can be converted, changed from one form to another, but it can't be created or destroyed. So that's the conservation of energy. So you're going to have equal amounts of energy before and after, although they might look different. We can convert it from potential to kinetic, to heat, but we don't actually lose any energy. So heat is a type of kinetic energy. It's energy in motion. That's the movement of molecules. And as we heat it, they move faster. And anytime you have energy conversions, some of that energy that we would use to like build bonds is going to be released as heat. And it will usually leave the system that we're at, but it's not destroyed, it just moved. And that energy is randomized. So what that means is entropy. Molecules want to be random. Everything goes towards disorder. If we want to order it, we got to put work in. So when molecules, if you spray perfume in one spot, that's not random at all. All the molecules are right there. So what they want to do is spread out so that there's an equal likelihood of finding them anywhere. You don't know where they are. That's entropy. That's random. And there's just some cute cartoons. Second law, everything goes towards entropy, towards disorder. You can see, for example, over time things will spread out and become more disordered. They go towards random. Okay, so first law, you can't create or destroy energy. Second, entropy increases. We go from ordered to disordered. One form of potential energy is chemical energy. So what that means is we store energy in bonds. We're not using it right now, but if we break those bonds, we release energy. So that's how animals and plants work. We run on potential energy, chemical energy. So plants, during photosynthesis, they take sun energy, they convert it into chemical energy. They build up sugar molecules. And then we break those bonds, like at our mitochondria, to release the energy and do work. So let's look at how this works in your car, for example. So you've got these hydrocarbons, you have combustion, you break them down, that gives us heat, kinetic energy moves the car, and then you've got waste products. So in the cell, exact same idea. Now we're going to have like food molecules like sugars, fats, proteins. And they go through cellular respiration at the mitochondria, where we make ATP that our cells will use for energy. Okay, so chapter 6 is cellular respiration, and we're just going to just get a little bit into this process. So in our cells, we've got mitochondria. We break down sugar using oxygen to make ATP. And photosynthesis is the other step there. That's how we make the sugars. So when you put sunlight in, you need carbon dioxide and water. You have these reactions where we convert sunlight into chemical energy. So plants, like they have chloroplasts that do this, and then they also have mitochondria, so that once they've made the sugar, they can break it down to do the work that their cells need to do. And let's discuss food calories. So what does a calorie mean? A calorie is the amount of energy that takes 1 gram of water and increases its temperature by 1 degree Celsius. What we have in these pictures are these simple bomb calorimeters. They measure calories. And so what you do is you burn the food, and then you see how much heat is produced, how much the water changes temperature. When we're talking about food, we talk about kilocalories. So that means 1,000 calories. So when you look at the amount of calories in anything that you're eating, that means that for each one of those, you could change 1,000 grams of water by 1 degree Celsius. So as we briefly mentioned, the mitochondria are where we do cellular respiration. They've got specialized enzymes and an internal structure that allows them to do this. And what they make by breaking down sugar is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So that adenosine is the A in the DNA nitrogenous base A. And then we've got triphosphate, 3 phosphate groups. So what you're doing at the mitochondria is you're building these bonds. They're very high energy. So let's say we want to pump, push something out of the cell. What you'll do is your cells will break this bond. When that happens, that releases energy so that they can pump the pump. And then what you're left with is adenosine diphosphate. It's got 2 now, and then another phosphate. So then our mitochondria could put that back on, and we could, have ATP again. So that's the ATP cycle. We have ATP, we break it to ADP with 2 phosphates and a lone phosphate. We release energy to do work. And then we build it back up again at the mitochondria from fuel molecules like sugar that we've eaten. It's the whole point. And we complete this ATP cycle at the chloroplast and mitochondria. So chloroplast plants, they take the sun energy, they make the fuel for us. They make sugars. And then we take that over to the mitochondria. They break it down to make ATP that our cells can use. So plants, they have both chloroplast and mitochondria, so they can do all the work that they need to do. Whereas like non-autotrophs, like things that don't make their own energy, like us, we just have mitochondria. So we have to eat our nutrients to break them down and make ATP. Let's look at what we need for both parts. Let's look at what these equations mean. So this is the equation for cellular respiration. What you put in, your reactants, and what you get out, your products. So we've eaten our sugar. You can also get proteins and fats to a point in the cycle as well. And we put that in, and oxygen. You need oxygen to do cellular respiration. That's the whole reason we breathe it in. And then they go through these 3 steps. And at the end of those 3 steps, we've got lots of ATP, between 30 and 36 generally, depending on what source you look at. And we also have other byproducts. Water, which is great, our cell uses it, and carbon dioxide, which is not great. If it builds up in our tissues, it's toxic, so we need to breathe it out. So the first step of cellular respiration is called glycolysis. Glyco, sugar, lysis, breakdown. So what happens there is we break down glucose, the C6H12O6, 6-carbon sugar, down into 2 3-carbon sugars. So here's a picture showing our 6-carbon glucose, breaking it down into 2 3-carbon molecules. So at the end of the glycolysis portion, we've got 2 3-carbon sugars called pyruvate. And as long as there is oxygen present, these are going to go on to the next step. If there's no oxygen present, what happens is our cells convert them into lactic acid. So glycolysis is really fast. We make 2 ATP. So we don't make much energy, but we make it really fast, and we don't need oxygen. So it would be called anaerobic. Doesn't use oxygen. But if there's oxygen, it'll go on to the next steps. So after glycolysis, the next step is the Krebs cycle. It's also called the citric acid cycle. And there's multiple steps in here. And what happens during this is we take those 3-carbon sugars and we break them down till we've got 6 carbon dioxide. So each of those carbons becomes a carbon dioxide molecule. And through that time, we make some ATP, but mostly we have these molecules that carry electrons. They carry a hydrogen atoms. And they go through the last step, which is called the electron transport chain. And there, the hydrogens move through a pump, and they move through the ATP synthase pump. And each one that goes through, we're able to make 1 ATP. So this is the part where we make most of our ATP at. And by the end, 30 to 36 ATP, those hydrogens go into water. Okay? So if you can understand what goes in and what comes out, and the 3 general steps, you're really good. Okay, let's see how we make that glucose and oxygen. That happens at photosynthesis. So at plants, they're using light energy, and they need carbon dioxide and water and light energy to go through photosynthesis. So what happens at the chloroplast is you've got the Calvin cycle. Light goes in, we make molecules, it goes through the Calvin cycle, and by the end we're able to build a sugar. We've also made oxygen. So one of the things about deforestation is we're leaving more carbon dioxide in the air and we're not putting in oxygen. So plants are a wonderful thing. And what's really neat, I couldn't leave it out, is how different plants have different ways of doing photosynthesis depending on their environment. You've got C3 plants, which are most of the plants that we think of. C4, they use a 4-carbon sugar, and CAM. So their plants have these little stomata where they take in carbon dioxide. They're these little holes on their leaves of the cells, and they open to take carbon dioxide in. However, sometimes in areas that are really dry, you'll get CAM photosynthesis. They've evolved that, where during the day when it's really hot, the stomata are closed. That way they don't lose any water. They open up at night so they can do the carbon dioxide portion of photosynthesis.